Hi, Scott Reeder. I'm artist based in Chicago and now New York. I'm a professor of painting at the Art Institute of Chicago. I really like it. It's really beautiful. I like the architecture. I really like seeing style of the city, and I like that it seems like it's a city that's open late, and just the design elements of it I really appreciate. And so far, and then going to the older part of the city was really interesting. I was able to do that. That was really beautiful, seeing how the older architecture works with some of the newer things. So far I've really liked it. It's my first time here, so it's been a lot to take in. I could see it having an influence. We'll see what happens. But usually this stuff finds a way to enter into your work, like where you go. It might not come right away, but I think it's definitely gonna affect me in some way. Well, I think I'm a big fan of Magritte. I like there's absurdity to his work and a little bit of a sense of humor, and so I can see the comparison with my work. But I'm especially interested in this lesser known period of his work called the period Vache, where I think it originated. It was his first solo exhibition in Paris, and at the time he was sort of upset with Paris. He'd lived there for a few years but hadn't really been embraced, and so he tried this new series of work that was really much looser and faster and more colorful, and he kind of wanted to challenge the Parisian audience and make something that they weren't expecting. And it wasn't really well received at the time, but now it's been more embraced. So he was looking at the Fauvists and Matisse, and it's a lot more loose, and even looking at caricatures and comics. And so it's a much more playful version of Magritte, but still with some of the surreal imagery. So I think that's Magritte is an influence on me. And the Midwestern part of that description, the Midwestern Magritte, I think I can embrace that too, because I've lived in Milwaukee and Chicago and Detroit and grew up in Michigan, and I think something about when you're in the Midwest in America, you're between the two coasts. You're not in the West Coast, you're not in the East Coast, and I think it's an interesting vantage point to sort of see both things, but develop something that might be more your own. So I think I was probably influenced also by the Chicago Imagists, or people that I teach with at the Art Institute. And so like the better known ones like Jim Nutt or Ed Paschke, but then I would probably gravitate more to Roger Brown, or Christina Ramberg is an amazing artist that just had a show, or Sue Ellen Roca. And all of those artists are doing things in the 60s and 70s when New York was only working with abstraction. They're doing their own thing with imagery, and so they called the imagery, it was so noteworthy that doing something against the trend. And so I think that's one nice thing. If you're in the Midwest, you have a vantage point of being outside of these other forces, and you can sort of forge your own path. So that's always been important to me. I think that titles are always important, or I've always liked how just even putting two words together can build a story or an image. And so there's a few examples of that in this exhibition, where I did a whole series of 4-letter words that make little statements, and I like how maybe the viewer might complete that work. So you make an image in your head, what those things might be. So like the one example from the show, I'm looking right at it, post-work. So I like there's a little bit of ambiguity what that might mean. Is it it's the time after you're done with work? Are you having a beer post-work? Or is it the future when no one has to work and it's an idyllic utopian community? Or it could mean post-work, you work for the postal system. So it could, I like that there's an openness to it. It's like another painting from that series, Idea Jail. It's sort of visual. I don't paint the idea jail, you imagine what it is. And so I like the idea of limitations and having rules. I feel like necessity is the mother of invention. So when you have like these rules, like with the word paintings, that they're just 4-letter words, and something happens when you reduce the elements. And so the way that they work, the language works with the image paintings, is it usually starts with a title rather than an image. So I might have a title that I think is evocative, and then that might make an image from it. And like this one that's called Daylight. It's a flower looking at the sun, but the sun is on a computer screen, so it's sort of like photosynthesis, digital photosynthesis, or sort of speaking in the moment of that we're in now, where everyone's just looking at their screens all the time. And as a logistical, just a process element to my studio practice, I make a lot of lists, and I make little notes all the time. And so there's a whole series of paintings that came out of, I would see these lists around my studio of paintings that I wanted to make, or sculptures, or videos, or ideas, and I realized I had more ideas than I had time in the day to realize, and some of the ideas might be better just unrealized, just as a concept. So I started making these list paintings that are just, sometimes they're realized and sometimes they aren't, but I like that exist in that kind of in-between space with language. Yeah. My undergraduate I did in University of Iowa. For some reason, the International Archive for Fluxus is housed there, and also Dada. So there was all these great scholars and lecturers and artists that would come speaking about Fluxus and Dada, and both of those movements have some interest in chants, like John Cage or Duchamp had. So John Cage is an interest, but also Hans Arp is another artist interested in chants, who did. I think there's the story of him working for days on a drawing, getting frustrated when he came back to his studio that wasn't satisfied how it was looking, so he ripped it up and threw the scraps of paper on the ground. The next day he saw the scraps of paper and it's like, oh, that's more dynamic and interesting than what I was consciously trying to do. And so then he started to make paintings based on chance. And so I had a similar thing with language, where I would make big lists of words and throw darts at them, and then that would generate these juxtapositions of words that would come up with images. And it was just a way to get started and make a painting. But I also liked how there'd be these kind of accidental narratives, or when these two things, unlike things, are put together. And so that's where it all started with me. So it's an ongoing thing I'm still interested in chance and like what can happen. I think I initially was thinking a little bit about still life, like my paintings sit somewhere between still life and surrealism. So I liked it where it's ambiguous. Are these gigantic fruit and vegetables, or is it a miniature? Like this therapist's office. Is this a miniature therapist's office, and the pear and the banana are just still actual size? And so I went there to be, I think that I like the idea of elevating these everyday objects and making these narratives from them, but stopping short of not anthropomorphizing them to the point where they have arms and legs and smiley faces, that they're still sort of themselves. So sort of stuck in between. They're almost alive, but still sort of inanimate. And then the more recent, I think I could introduce more characters. It's not, this isn't the end. I could see other objects entering into it someday, but the recent interest in bread and butter, I think I like them as being a little bit even more impossible, like it's right on the cusp of what you can empathize with. They're not very emotive or dynamic. They're these, like a cube or like a flat surface, and so I kind of like the challenge of that, like trying to make them come alive but still be themselves. And then as a couple, there's more narrative potential with it. So it's bread and butter will eventually be mushed together, but in my painting so far, you don't see that moment. So there's a little bit of a tension. You don't know if it's romantic, if they're going to get closer or farther apart. Do they get in a fight, or are they really connecting? So I really like where this is going with the bread and butter. And then the butter has this kind of built-in drama. Sometimes the butter's laying in the sun or in a tropical setting, so there's a little bit of a idea of danger or mortality, like you're enjoying this beautiful moment, but also melting. It won't last forever, So there's a little bit of existential drama going on in the work, where these things that are impermanent, like a melting ice cream cone or a popsicle or a stick of butter. I think humor isn't always a natural fit for art, but I think since Duchamp, maybe it's more acceptable, and I think of like a Duchamp piece, like In Advance of a Broken Arm, where it's another example of where the title is very important to the work. So it's just a shovel, but without the title, you wouldn't have that kind of directed narrative. And so I think I think humor is important to my work, and some of it's more overtly humorous, and some is more subtly humorous. So work like the Pasta series, I think it doesn't look humorous in a loud way. It's a much more quiet way. So when you first see it, you might not sure what it's about. It looks more like a formal exercise about composition and color and line. But then when you realize it's all made with spaghetti or linguine, and how it's made is funny. So it sort of flips it. Where these image paintings, I think of, they look colorful and playful at first, but then some of them have a darker message, or the longer you look at them, they get a little bit more melancholy or heavy. Like this one of the green interior, where it's a couple of a pear and a banana disrobed. The banana skin has been removed, and the peel's been removed, and then there's another banana peering in the window, and something's going on there. We're not sure if it's like a voyeur, the other banana's a voyeur, or there's been caught in some moment of indiscretion, infidelity. And so I like that kind of unfolds slowly in a painting like that. And that goes back to like the question of titles and language. With these image paintings, I'm interested maybe in the titles being less directed, so sort of open-ended, like that's green interior, and I have a pink interior and a blue interior, and so it's more like a traditional art historic title that is very neutral, but then when you see what's going on, this is a pretty weird pink interior with a smoking flower. Yeah. Well, I think Milton Avery is an artist that's not super well known, but has been a big influence in color. He has a great sense of color and odd combinations, and I think Rothko was influenced by Milton Avery, and you wouldn't necessarily connect those two artists, but when you look at it, you can see it really clearly. There's a lot of strange pinks and purples and pastels, and so that's a big color influence. And then Gustin, of course, is where there's sort of social content, but then a cartoon style and a really personal palette. So Philip Gustin is another influence. But then I also like Morandi. I like this sort of quietness of Morandi and just the still life, and that you can make this great painting that's really subtle and they're just how simple, and also that's a great example of like limiting the elements and seeing what kind of world you can build with just a few elements, and that's kind of what I've been interested in this latest work. And then some are just more apparent, like Matisse is a big one. Some more contemporary ones that maybe relate more to my abstract work, I'm a big fan of Mary Heilman, who's just this great abstract American painter. Started off with ceramics, and is sort of the way she paints a painting is like almost like you would glaze a pot, so it's very loose and simple and not fussy. And I like the directness of her work, and it's all just really beautiful, sort of uplifting, whimsical kind of colors. And then another more contemporary example, Laura Owens is one of my favorite contemporary painters, and just also the way that she moves between all different bodies of work, really different sort of styles and approaches, but it's ambitious and really worked out, but also very whimsical and playful and light. And I think painting's been the reoccurring thing for the longest. Most of my artistic endeavors move through painting. All paths go through painting one way or the other. But this recent feature-length film that I made, that's a sort of a artistic, I don't know what to call it, sci-fi, art house sci-fi. So it's like about a hotel on the moon called Moondust, and that ended up being sort of painterly. Built, all the sets were hand painted and designed, and everything was very tactile. There were no digital effects. It's all practical effects. And that medium of film and video, I really do enjoy, because you use all aspects of my brain or creativity. So you could have dialogue, so you can use language, music, you have color in set design and painting, and then even like costumes. And so I can see wanting to do more with film and video and time-based mediums. I want to continue to expand on that. And then with the one thing I haven't played around with much, and I don't know whether to embrace it or run from it, but AI could be an interesting thing to work with. There might be some way to have that like enter in the practice as a new tool, and not in like taking it over, but I could see it being part of my output. Well, I think I always respond to art that gives itself over to the viewer, so that I think for me, successful art is open to multiple interpretations. And so I think I like in my own practice to leave space for the viewer to bring their own story or meaning to the work, and I don't really have a fixed idea of what the content means. So if I knew exactly what the painting or object meant, I wouldn't have to make it. I could just write it down on a piece of paper. But so there always is some mystery even for me, so I'm always asking sort of what if you put these things together, if I tried this image using these colors and using a different approach than I had before, and I don't really know the answer to what if until I make it. But I also am interested in having other people bring their own stories to it. So I'm always playing around with that. Well, we were talking about, this morning we were talking about maybe doing something with video or something time-based or something, because I am working, so having something like a time-based medium, maybe a short film or video that could, with some paintings that go with it, and that could be like an interesting direction or something new to do, and it's been something I'm working on as a sort of sequel to the other movie. So I've shot new footage in these sets, and that could be an interesting thing to try, and seems like a good fit for this gallery. That would be exciting. And then just in general, being with this work and seeing this group of paintings together, which I haven't been in one place before, it's just giving me ideas of how I could play around with scale a little more in my work too, and it makes me want to work a little bigger and maybe even a little smaller, have a range of scale. So it's been really great to see how all these things are working together, and it's giving me ideas about future work. Well, I think looking at these few paintings in here, and then the promotional, there's like a banner outside, seeing it blown up, one of my smaller works, and it's just like, oh, some certain ones would really work on a larger scale. I also, the ones, I was looking at the ones with the more simple washy colors that are influenced maybe by David Hockney or Alex Katz even a little, and I think scaling them up could be really interesting. And then the characters in the painting could be scaled up too, but they could also stay kind of more life-size, and then the environments could get bigger. So those are some ideas I've had just from the few days I've been here and seeing how this exhibition turned out, and when it's hung on the wall, it's giving me a lot of ideas. A little bit hopeful or playful, or maybe I'm always interested in expanding the definition of what art could be or what painting could be. So if painting is supposed to be about this subject or done in this familiar sort of approved way, is there a way you can make a painting that is doing something a little bit different? And so I always want there to be an element of surprise, and so I'm hoping I'm bringing that to this work to a new audience.